Thank you for coming on short notice. This conference is called to provide the public with information on a critical issue regarding the state budget and the bond authorization bill. Here are the facts. The purpose of the 45-day period following the end of the legislature is to examine bills for content and consistency. A major legal challenge has emerged that must be addressed. The budget bill and the bond authorization bill must balance. They do not. There is a failure to reconcile the numbers in the amount of $444 million. Decisions must be taken now to avoid facing a very difficult situation on July 1st. I have consulted with the Speaker and the Senate President on the issues involved, focusing on solutions and moving forward. Short of a special session, we have a proposal to reduce the imbalance to $46 million and to allow for fiscal operations to begin July 1st. The Attorney General will outline the legal situation, and the Budget and Finance Director will explain what happened and what is proposed by way of a solution. David?
Thank you, Governor. As the Governor has said, as a practical and legal matter, the state's budget must be balanced. And this includes all bills that the legislature passes that provide authorization for general obligation bonds and appropriations to spend general obligation funds on specific projects. That authority comes from the Constitution, Article 7, Section 13, which requires a declaration of findings that the debt limit will not be exceeded and requires that the debt is certified by law. In other words, look, you've got to have a certain amount of authorization for general obligation bonds to get money, and then you have to have the same for your appropriations. If they're out of balance, you've got a problem. You certainly don't want to have a situation where you have authorized a certain amount of money and then you've spent a lot more. That would be improper and illegal. So normally there are two bills that handle this through the legislature, a general obligations bond bill and an appropriations bill. Unfortunately, this year, those numbers did not align and they're out of balance, and that has to be fixed. So that's one issue that occurs. The second issue that occurs is that normally there's a carryover of approximately $400 million in the State Educational Facilities Improvement Special Fund. It's called SEFI, S-E-F-I. And normally what would happen is that the unspent monies, which is approximately $400 million, would be force lapsed. That is, in one of the bills, they would say, we're going to lapse these funds now. So that did not happen, unfortunately. If that forced lapse does not occur, there's actually an automatic lapse that occurs June 30th. But it creates a problem. If the governor were to sign these bond bills and the appropriation bills now, without this $400 million in SEFI funds being lapsed, it would create a huge imbalance. We cannot have that. The governor has been advised that he cannot legally sign these bills because then we would have a problem with the constitutional requirements. Kalbert.
So as the Attorney General has outlined, there is a misalignment between the executive branch's budget bill, which is House Bill 1700, as passed by the legislature, and a number of other branch appropriation bills for budgets, so the judiciary's budget, and a number of separate appropriation bills passed by the legislature as well, all of which include general obligation bonds as a source of funding for capital projects. The aggregate amount of general obligation bonds in each of those bills are to be authorized from the bond declaration or the bond authorization bill, which is House Bill 1712. They currently do not. They are out of alignment. The SEFI issue, we believe that there is a resolution that can occur with the passage of time, specifically from the change of one fiscal year to the next, June 30th to July 1st. However, that will create a situation in which the timing of the governor's signature on the budget bill and or the bond authorization bill will be very sensitive and important to match those timings. The governor and myself have met with Senate President and the Speaker of the House to discuss the issue, and the executive branch and the legislative branch, we believe, have agreed on a resolution that would be the most surgically efficient to allow the signature of both of these bills, being sensitive to the timing, but also to the need of when the budget bill needs to be signed before the conclusion of this fiscal year so that it can be in place for the start of the next fiscal year on July 1st. In reviewing the alternatives available to resolve this issue, we have asked the Department of Education to assist the governor with the resolution. The department has agreed, and I'll outline their participation a little bit more thoroughly. The Department of Budget and Finance believes that the Department of Education, as part of this resolution, can accommodate the measure and the strategy that we will be employing. So to begin, what will be necessary is that the governor has already been advised that he will have to communicate to the legislature his intent to line item veto or line item reduce components of the executive branch's budget bill before he signs it. That communication and the timing of his signature on the budget bill will have to be sensitive to signing before the conclusion of this fiscal year. The Department of Budget and Finance and the legislature has suggested to the governor that he could resolve the $45 to $46 million discrepancy by line item vetoing particular and surgical components of the House Bill 1700, the executive branch's budget. In combination of resolving the $399 million in the SEFI discrepancy, that can occur naturally, as the Attorney General has pointed out, with the passage of time between June 30th to July 1st. So what the governor is going to be advised is that he will line item reduce an amount equal to about $45 to $46 million under the reauthorized SEFI appropriation included by the legislature in House Bill 1700. In conversations with the Department of Education, they have confirmed that they can accommodate this strategy without impacting their planned level of projects or the execution and timing of those projects, because these are school facility projects. Because this is a highly technical area in terms of the timing and the composition of both of these bills, I actually would like to recognize the Department of Education and thank them for their willingness to cooperate and be part of the solution. We wanted to make sure and to reaffirm to the public that the Department of Education can accommodate without impacting any of their planned projects over the next fiscal year. However, it is predicated on the necessity for the legislature to reinstate or reauthorize the amount that the governor will have to line item reduce when the legislature reconvenes in January of 2015 in order to avoid any long-term project impacts for their projects that they currently have planned over the next 2 years. And so with that, myself and Attorney General Louie are available for any questions that you may have.
How did this happen, I guess, is the one question.
Kalbert?
Well, the bills come to the governor and they're out of alignment, basically. One of the bills sets forth a particular number for debt, but the other bill, so I believe 1712 which is the bond authorization bill, sets forth a particular number for the bond authorization. The appropriations, however, is a large omnibus bill, and it's not until you drill down and you add them all up that you go, okay, we missed.
The question was,
And I'm not, since I was not serving in the legal administration, I'm not familiar with those situations. However, our advice is that it would be inappropriate and, quite frankly, illegal for the governor to sign these bills in the state that they are in, because automatically we would be out of whack, out of budget, and not in compliance with the Constitution.
Yeah, I'm not.
I believe our interpretation at the Department of the Attorney General is that, yes, there has to be a balanced budget. There is not a specific line in the Constitution that says that, or a statute, but as taken as a whole and taken with the way it works, yes, I firmly believe we have to have a balanced budget.
Dirk, I'm not sure if this particular instance is the same as what may have occurred with the state previously, but the issue here really is on the constitutional requirement for the bond declaration. That the declaration bill actually is a requirement of the legislature to authorize the sale of bonds that are equal for all of the amount of bonds that have been appropriated in the budgets. So it's for that reason they need to be in alignment, because otherwise, if the governor was to sign the budget bill or the bond authorization bill at the inappropriate or at the incorrect time, we would be in a situation where he is tantamount appropriating or making legal the appropriation of certain levels of bonds, but not providing the requisite amount of authorization to sell those bonds. That's the technical misalignment.
So the declaration is under or over?
The declaration is less than the amount of bonds that have actually been appropriated.
He asked, how did it happen?
Well, I think as AG has outlined, it's that there's a number of bills, budget bills from the judiciary, OHA, the executive branch, as well as a number of appropriation bills that are independent appropriation bills that have to get aggregated in terms of the amount, and that amount included in the bond authorization bill. That didn't occur. Our forensics in budget and finance after the conclusion of the legislature basically goes through to make sure there are a number of things that are met before the governor is advised to sign any of the bills. It's through that forensic exercise that this discrepancy, we noticed it. But it's beyond the source of the discrepancy. Our forensic that's not part of our forensic review.
And quite frankly, we're trying to solve a problem as opposed to lay blame or determine how it exactly came about. There is a misalignment. We know there's a misalignment. Once we've identified it, then the focus has been on how do we fix that.
Did this at all make you think about calling them back in a special session to fix this problem? Did that ever come up, Governor?
the legislature can call itself back into special session. It is one of the ways to deal with this is for the legislature to come back and do 2 new bills and have a special session to do it. Well, you'd have to ask the legislature whether they want to do that. I'm trying to deal with the situation that has been handed to us. Look, the budget bill and the bond authorization bill have to match. They don't. You have to check the boxes. You have to do the math. It didn't happen. So now we're confronted with what do we do, short of a special session.
And let me just note that A special session, while it could certainly solve the problem, it's also the executive branch is able to solve this problem. As Kalbert has described, with the help of the Department of Education, we're actually able to deal with this problem short of a special session. But should the legislature call a special session, it could be fixed.
The option of a special session as an alternative was considered and reviewed with the Speaker and the President, and as an alternative. And collaboratively, we all agreed that since this issue could be resolved by the governor, that all things be considered, that would be the more desirable approach instead of a special session requirement.
But it has to be clear that we can only take it down so far. We can go from the 444 million to 46 million. But that has to be resolved, or should be resolved, by the legislature then the following January. That would, it's in that respect, I mean, to call the legislature back in, the legislature relies on its own internal processes to make sure that everything is in order. As I indicated, the budget bill has a column, you add it up. The bond authorization bill has a column, you add it up. They're supposed to match. They didn't.
Do you know, by looking at the budget worksheets, if this was an error that was done in conference committee, or was this an error that came out of the House or the Senate?
I suggest that you go to the legislature and make an inquiry. That's out of my kuleana. I have to deal with the aftermath.
Well, can you speak to what the DOE is going to be giving up? Is it 45 to 46 million specifically that the Department of Education will do without?
So the CEFI funds is not specifically to individual identified projects. This is merely the money that will be provided to hundreds of millions of dollars of projects that are classified as CEFI funded. So the Department of Education is working on dozens and dozens of CEFI projects over the next 2 years. This is only related to a small portion of their overall funding. They will need full funding to complete those projects. But in conversations with the Department of Education, I do believe that they have a plan that they can move forward as planned over the next year with their scheduled projects, and it wouldn't be impacted, but they would need the legislature to reauthorize what the governor will have to line item reduce.
Sure, I understand that, but I guess my question is, one, how was DOE selected, and two, what specifically will be impacted by the lack of 45 to 46 million dollars?
Budget and Finance has recommended to the governor, after conversations with the Department of Education, that this approach is surgical in the sense that it will only impact one part of the overall budget. The CEFI appropriation is large enough, for one, is large enough to accommodate a $45 to $46 million reduction without impacting government operations. So we have a department that has a large enough appropriation, as well as a timing issue, the combination of both of those two, where they can accommodate this strategy without impacting projects. But again, it's predicated on the belief and the reliance that the legislature will have to put the money back in no later than the very next legislative session. As far as specific projects, in conversations with the Department of Education, we do not believe that there are any projects that need to be specifically identified, because over the next year, all of the planned projects in the DOE that they were planning to execute and planning to queue up are going to move forward unimpeded from this strategy. So there are no specific projects. Because CEFI does not fund specific projects in themselves, there is no identification or need to identify specific DOE projects.
Director, it is the amount that would have to be refunded by the legislature next legislative session, $400 million. You're essentially borrowing $400 million?
No, it's the amount the legislature will have to put in if the governor does move on this strategy, is he will line item reduce $45 to $46 million from the CEFI authorization. And then next legislative session, the legislature must basically reauthorize that same amount, 45 to 46 million. And in that way, the Department of Education will have its full funding over the next biennium period to do all of the projects as planned over the next 2 years.
Part of the reason that you cannot be casual about the idea of tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars is you have the document, I have the budget, the committee report right here, where it states without equivocation, it should be noted that the appropriations for the fiscal year 2014-15 include a lapse and reauthorization of $399 million in general obligation bonds to recapitalize the State Educational Facilities Improvement Fund, as requested by the administration. That did not happen. Now, there's no way around it. You either do your job or you don't. I have a job to do. I'm not about to sign a bill that is close. I'm not about to sign a bill that is almost legal. I'm proposing a course of action that will minimize the pain and capitalize as much as possible on my ability to be able to correct this course of action with which I've been presented.
Did the legislature not do its job?
The budget bill and the bond authorization bill are supposed to balance. They don't.
Okay, any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.